All right, guys, welcome back. And we're going to be going into some card talk now. We're going to be doing our Gimmick Good or Golden segment here, where those of you who've been watching the last few weeks, we go through each card, and I have the three guys classify the cards as Gimmick, Gold, or Golden. Gimmick being maybe a faddish card or just a bad card. Good being okay, but just not OP or not too bad, something in between. Maybe will be good in the future. And then Golden, something that's just great right now and will probably be in the meta for a long time. So let's start off with a mage card. So Caldera Drake, it's a 6 mana 6/6 dragon that has a text you can only use your hero power you can use your hero power any number of times. Reynad, why don't you start off?
Caldera Drake is a really interesting card. It's like the one card that I think has some potential that I haven't actually gotten to play with much yet. Since there isn't really a deck for it yet, I'm guessing it's not great, but it's something I want to test out. Definitely lets you do cool things because the dragon lets you build your deck in a lot of interesting ways, and it's kind of a threat even if you don't play like Maiden of the Lake type stuff with it. It's if it just lives, you have a pretty interesting turn available. So yeah, I think it's playable, but it's going to take probably more sets for it to be good. I don't know. I'm on the fence about this. You always pick really hard cards.
Okay. Savjz?
Yeah, I think the card is kind of cool, but the synergies are just not there, and I don't think it's strong enough that even with some new cards, with Inspire in particular, get introduced. Like right now, most of the Inspire cards are, in my opinion, a little bit underwhelming. So if there's some other cool Inspire cards, Caldera Drake obviously going up in value because you're gonna get the effects multiple times on the same turn. But I'm gonna go with Gimmick on this one. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, so we got a good, a Gimmick, and how about you, Noxious?
I'd say like between good and Gimmick. It's a card that I kind of put, I don't want to put it on the level of Mysterious Challenger because that'd be completely ridiculous. Because one does something when it comes in play, and the other one has to stick around. But when that card comes down, Caldera Drake, if you're able to keep it alive even for one turn, the opponent's kind of in a freak out panic mode. And as a result, very often when it comes down uncontested, you're kind of forcing your opponent to make really suboptimal plays to get rid of it because they might just be very afraid of what comes next. So just based on that alone, I'm pretty sure there'll come a time where there'll be a deck where it fits and where it's considered kind of a standalone drop that you play, and I don't want to say like Dr. Boom, but you play it and it doesn't do anything right now, but it's going to scare them in about the same way.
I think that's kind of the thing, because I don't think it's that status right now. I don't think it's a card that you need to react to, like, oh my god, there's a Caldera Drake. I think it should be, and if there was more things that happen afterwards, but I don't know. I guess time will tell.
What do you guys think of this in a dragon deck?
That's probably where I'd play it. Right?
Yeah.
You have good dudes leading up to it.
Yeah.
I think you want to play like a very minimal amount of Inspire stuff. Like I don't think I would play this with Nexus Champion Serrat or anything like that. I think Maiden of the Lake is the only really good combo. Is there anything else? I can't really think of much.
No,
like Justicar and Maiden of the Lake, I suppose, but that is long.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You could play like the Fallen Hero, I guess. But that's like on turn 7. If you play it on 7, you're only getting 2 extra hero powers. So you'd have to play it much later, where you can get 10 full mana and you go for, a lot more damage. But I don't know. I just feel like the way Inspire panned out makes this card worse than it should be.
Yeah. All right, so somewhere between Gimmick and good for this one. All right, next up we got a Shaman card. It's 2 mana drop, Ancestral Knowledge. Text is draw 2 card, Overload 2. So one issue with Shaman has always been just the ability to draw cards, right? Mana Tide Totem's always been defenseless for the most, it doesn't have any attack, right? So usually it's kind of hard to draw more than one card a lot of times. So this is another ability for Shaman to be able to draw cards. Savjz, what do you think?
Well, I played with this actually a lot. It's one of the things that cards, probably the card that I've spent the most out of the ones that we're discussing today, because I've been playing a lot of the combo Shaman with like Malygos and that type of stuff. And I think the card is really cool, and that's definitely something that Shaman needed. But the overload for 2, I think that's just too taxing. Because basically you are adding 1 card to your hand, and I found that you don't want to play this on turn 2 ever. You don't want to play it on turn 3. It's very like weird. You want to wait a long time, and I wish the overload was just 1, and even then, like the card wouldn't be an auto include. So I'm being a little bit disappointed by it. But the mechanic of drawing cards as Shaman is a very important one. But if this card was stronger, maybe Shaman would be in better shape than it is right now at the bottom.
Noxious?
So I'm gonna go with Gimmick on this one.
Gimmick, okay.
I wish it was a tiny bit better. Then it would be good. If it was even a tiny bit, if it was lower than 1, I would say good for sure.
Okay. Noxious?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in Magic, the Gathering, card draw is priced properly, and in Hearthstone, it's pretty cheap compared to that. And I feel like this is the one card in Hearthstone that really demands that you pay a lot, or at least more than other Hearthstone cards ask of you. So in that regard, I feel like it's balanced. But the problem is, when I play the same Malygos deck that Savjz plays, or something along those lines, and you play stuff like Elemental Destruction. It's kind of like a turn 7 play. Like you go Elemental Destruction and you play Ancestral Knowledge and you slap in a Lava Shock to make sure that your turn 8 is not too clunky. So I think this card will be good once we have a reason to have Overload. Like Unbound Elemental is not good enough. Lava Shock is kind of a gimmick to pull off. If we ever get like a 0-cost spell that deals, or even 1 cost that deals damage equal to your overloaded crystals, I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Cool. Yeah.
You could pull off like a crazy. You have a good reason to want to overload yourself. And at that point, if that's ever a good archetype, it might be too good, where then suddenly having Overload is so valuable that cards like Ancestral Knowledge break the deck by giving you stuff like Lava Burst and Lightning Bolt. But I don't know, I feel right now it's just not working out at all from what I've seen. I don't like it too much. I'd say good, but tentatively it's kind of there.
Between good and gimmick then. All right. Ray?
I think like long term, this card will be good because I don't think there's a single spell in Hearthstone that draws cards that like doesn't see play. It's one of those effects that's like charge where at some point it becomes really good and important. So something like Battle Rage, for example, if you asked before BlackRock, everyone would call that card a gimmick, and now it's like the best card in the best deck, or second best behind Dustbite or whatever. So I think like an effect like this, the biggest problem with Ancestral Knowledge is not even the overload, it's the fact that you draw Shaman cards, which suck. So I think that might change in the future, and when that does, this becomes a lot stronger.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, because there's nothing you want to draw into really right now. It's sort of like that combo deck, right? It's like that one deck.
Imagine this card in Warrior. It'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Oh
my god.
Shield slams.
I'd probably quit the game. Oh goodness, that's really scary.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, right now I'm only seeing it in combo decks, whether it's Malygos or I've even seen Reincarnate kind of combo decks using this too. But that idea with the whole spells doing damage the same as Overload, that's kind of interesting, Noxious. That'd be cool if they did something like that. Okay, next card. We've got, all right, the 2 legendaries, but we're going to start with this one. It's Fajola Lightbane, 3 mana, drop, 3/4 body. Text is, whenever you target this minion, it gains Divine Shield. Noxious, you want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, she's kind of okay. It's just that when you have, the option between her and her twin sister, I guess, it's kind of hard to justify taking the Divine Shield one, just because right now there's a lot of pings lying around, and, classes don't really have that much of a problem dealing with it. And the fact that you have to invest into targeting it in the first place makes it a little clunky. How many classes realistically have that? You have Priest with Valence Chosen, Powered Shield, Druid, who might be trying to play some kind of weird aggro variant, with like Marks of the Wild, which is, we've seen some of that, but usually the counterpart is usually better at that. So the Divine Shield just doesn't seem to me like something I'd care for too much. And it's funny because when I saw it, I was like, a 3-mana 3/4 with an added effect, that's got to be good somewhere, and it doesn't seem to work even in Paladin. So,
all right, Ray.
I think it's one of those cards that scales as more cards get released pretty well. Because right now it's like very limited amount of targeting effect. But if there's one Velen's Chosen getting added to the game every set, or maybe there's another card that generates spare parts that doesn't suck, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot stronger because it's such a big.
Oh, I think somebody's mic just went crazy.
What was
All
that?
right. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody's mic went crazy there for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, it's better now.
All right. Yeah. So, what was I gonna say? Yeah, it's one of the cards that scales. There's only 30 card decks in Hearthstone, so as soon as there's one Clockwork Gnome type of thing that's, good enough to see play on its own, like let's say like a 2-mana 2/3 Clockwork Gnome or something. Like that's a reasonable card that you could justify putting in some decks. So I think as more of those things get released, this card gets a lot better, and I think like both sisters will see play. But the other one's probably always going to be better, so I don't think Lightbane will see play unless like the other one is already in the deck.
Okay, Savjz?
I think again, like I'm kind of on the same line with the other guys about this. The Aegis Darkbane is the better one of the two, but Viola is the weaker one. I think both of these are excellent in Priest, but the thing is that Dark Cultist is already so good and that you can't really run both, so that's the problem really when it comes to Priest. And the other buff classes being Druid and Paladin, I don't, they're not worth running in those two just yet. If more buffs get released to those particular classes, or something like Reynad mentioned, the spare part things, I think that these cards will be playable at some point. If there's some cheap, easy buffs, there's something that really combos well with them. Some kind of buff cards that are worth running even without the synergy. Like that's the big thing, because you can't really add extra buffs just to like complement these guys. I've tried it in Paladin, adding things like Blessing of Wisdom to try combo it a little bit, but it just didn't seem worth it. Like those cards are not strong enough. So if Druid or Paladin gets more buffs that work well even without this, then you might be just like, sure, throw those in. They're pretty solid.
Yeah. One last note. If we're gonna close the topic, like I've tried this card out as a curve play, like with Blood Knight, where you just like play her on 3, and then on 4 you go Blessing of Might or Blessing of Wisdom, and then you go into Blood Knights. You get a 3-mana 6/6 out of your own Divine Shield, which you got out of a buff. So in that case, it's kind of interesting, where it's basically giving. It's really just when this gets targeted, give +3/+3 to that one guy in your deck. But it's just even with those plays, it's still at best kind of a gimmick in that stage. I don't know.
Yeah, you guys brought up Itis too. So Itis obviously being the counterpart for this, which is same body, same mana, but the difference is no Divine Shield, but 3 damage to a random minion. Same issues. I mean, we obviously discussed just triggers not being there for Itis too. So probably Gimmick right now, possibly good later, I guess is the consensus here.
Yeah, right now Gimmick for sure.
Okay. All right, let's move on to a Warlock card. It's 2-mana drop, 4/3 body, demon. Well, whenever it's called Wrathguard, whenever this minion takes damage, also deal the amount of damage to your hero. So yeah, I've been a little surprised that we didn't see this. I thought this card would actually be played a lot more, just given that it's nice stats and health doesn't really matter to Warlocks. But Ray, what do you think?
The 2-drop slot is just so competitive. Like it's not the reason cards see play in Hearthstone isn't because they're like good. It's because they're the best option out of all of the options. So for 2-drops, there actually happens to be a lot of options, including cards that are in no way balanced at all, like Haunted Creeper and Knife Juggler. So like those cards are on Emperor Thorson levels of broken that so people don't like recognize. Like they see more playing more decks than Emperor. Like they're not okay, and Wrathguard doesn't compete with that. Like Wrathguard's a good card, but not like you can't make a 2-drop that you would play over Juggler Creeper, and in Warlock and Rubian Egg also better than this. Because those cards are just so hard to interact with. So even though Wrathguard is a good card, it's just like for a 2-mana card to see play, it has to be so good that it would be problematic. Like it would have to be a 2-mana 4/4 or something disgusting.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
But you can still play it. Like I have played it in really aggressive zoo lists where maybe I like didn't want Creeper, and then I just because it deals a lot of face damage. That's like the advantage of this card. But in almost always, it's going to be worse than Creeper.
Savjz?
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines as Reynad about that one. I think it's definitely a good card, but it's hard to justify playing it. You cannot play it over Juggler. You would never do that. Definitely, obviously a zoo card, but it's a Warlock card. But Creeper, or sometimes when I'm playing against zoo, I feel like when the Creeper hits the bottom turn 2, I'm like yes, because it only has 1 attack, and it's kind of low on threat. So Wrathguard is a much bigger threat if you can't answer it, and it can deal a lot of damage. The card, if it was slightly tweaked stats, let's say 3/4 instead of 4/3, it would be completely broken. Like it would die to Frostbolt. So I think that the stats are at the absolute maximum, and it's a good card. But the Creeper it's so sticky still. I think that most of the times you want the Creeper anyway, but it's definitely very close to playable. So good card.
Okay, Noxious?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this card is exactly like Reynad mentioned, and pretty much what I wanted to bring up, which is it just shows how insane 2-drops are in Hearthstone. And like Knife Juggler being one of the cards that I have the biggest gripe with as far as its design, because it's got like a lot of the sticking points about it really kind of irk me. Like the fact that it's a 3/2, so it's got a decent stat line, it's aggressive, it's got RNG built in. Just like all the things about Juggler that make it good. Because of that, you can't play a card like Wrathguard. I mean, I've tried playing the card, in aggressive decks that aim to just punch face, but the issue you have with it is that it just gets stalked by a random 2-mana 3/2. You take 3 damage from it, which is fine, but very often if you're not able to answer their smaller 2-drops, your 4/3 will still die to it, and you'll only have gained like 2 extra damage out of it at most. And for the most part, that's not playing into your long game, so it doesn't seem to fit anywhere. I wonder if when we get like a demon archetype, something that makes demons work. Because like when I saw Demon Fuse, as much as I laughed at it because it's kind of ridiculous, when you stack that with Power Overwhelming, and that's a lot of burst damage you can muster just from buffs. If there's ever a way to go full face with kind of a demon-oriented deck, I could see that fit in the future. But right now, it's mostly a gimmick. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a weird card. The Creeper is better, but there's more to it. If I knew that I would every time get to play this on turn 2, I would probably play it, because I think it would be good enough. But it's a really bad top deck when you get it on later on. Like getting the damage to your face, it's at that point it's going to be meaningful, and it usually can be dealt easily. While Creeper might have some added value, if like maybe Defender of Arcus, the Spiders or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, so overall, I think a little bit more towards the good than Gimmick on this one, and hopefully in the future we'll see some of this. Next up, we've got Bolf Ramshield, legendary, 6-mana, 3/9 body. Whenever your hero takes damage, this minion takes it instead. So this is the first card that actually has this type of text, which is kind of cool, right? Definitely different, which I'm always in favor of having different types of cards. Savjz, what do you think?
I tried so hard to make it work.
Of course,
I really
right?
tried.
Really?
I actually got a donation to craft a golden one. I crafted a golden one, and I tried and tried, but it doesn't seem to quite get the job done. It's so weird. Like it's taking out go face, and then it's like taking damage, and the stats not quite good enough. The mana cost is also too high. It feels so much better to play something like a heal bot, which is like kind of negates the same amount of damage, but it just works like way better. I don't know, like it's just a little bit underwhelming, but I'm happy that Blizzard kind of introduced this kind of type of card, because it is something that we haven't had before, so it's kind of pushing the limits, but in that sense, like design wise. So I think it's a really cool card, but definitely gimmick, and you don't want to use your dust on it.
Noxious?
This is the card that I was actually the most, like, one of the cards that I was most excited to just mess around with. Because, I asked, the first question that I asked the devs was, does this work with Faceless? And they said, yes, only one of them will take damage. So I'm like, yeah, if I get a lot of them on the board, I can have some fun. And I have 27 health shield, but at that point, I might as well run, a typical control warrior. So what am I doing with both in my life? And I wish this guy had a higher health total, so you could at least mitigate either more damage, because right now you can consider this guy as being like a 0/9 effectively, like it never retaliates, unless you're protecting it. But if you're protecting it, then do you really need the extra health from the Bolf? Not really. Not so much. So it's trying to do something that it can't even do properly, but I think one day, if there's ever a way to get a similar card for cheaper with a relatively high amount of health, it could be kind of fun to try something out.
Yeah, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely gimmick, right? Like, it's bad. It's you're paying 6 mana for like a double shield bearer. It's not worth it. But it's cool from like a balancing standpoint. What they thought about this ability. because it's a 6-mana 3/9. So if you compare that to Boulder Fist, it's like 5/7 worth of stats. So it's like worse than Boulder Fist. So they actually took stats off of this card for the ability, which means that they saw the ability as a net positive. Whereas I think having this ability on an expensive minion almost always is like a drawback, right? Like it should be like a 6/8 at least, like better than Boulder Fist, because this is like, if it didn't have text, it would be better. So that's like the scary thing, is that it's actually it looks like a good ability, like a defensive ability, but it's actually a drawback on a minion. So they could balance it in a really interesting way where it's like better than Boulder Fist. So you're actually like gaining stats in exchange for having this ability, and then you try to turn this drawback into a net positive somehow by playing in a defensive deck or something. And like that's how you end up with an interesting card where I think they just evaluated this ability as being like helpful on the minion, whereas it's actually a drawback, and the stats don't reflect that, and that's why it's so upsetting.
Yeah, I thought initially,
actually.
like a card that was like a format 2/7, say like format 2/7 that's not a legendary with the same ability would be pretty cool, because you'd get it, early enough to counter some of the early game, and you also mitigate phase damage. But at turn 6, those minions that die to 2 or 3 attack are kind of gone, so it really does very little.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I've ever had, only deck that I've made that's even had any remote success with this is the Confused deck.
Oh my god.
Just some kind of Confused. I think that day one I made like, medics and bulbs and Death Lords and all that stuff. That's about the only thing I've ever done, which, keeps you alive against aggro, but that's about all it does. All right, so Gimmick for this one. All right, next up we've got, a Hunter card. Ram Wrangler, 5 mana drop, 3/3 body, battle cry. If you have a beast, summon a random beast. Looks like we lost Noxious for a second. Let's see, whose turn is it? Ray, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, so this is a card that, unfortunately, the first time I played it, I did it on stream, and my opponents were like running Lotheb into my web spinner and stuff
right.
when they were playing aggressive decks just to stop this from working. So I feel like I didn't get the best testing with it. Because people know you have it, it's so much worse. It's like infinitely worse. But yeah, after playing with it a decent amount, like it's better than I initially thought it was. But I still wouldn't play it over something like Sludge Belcher. So yeah, I'm not in love with it. Maybe if there's just a few more beasts and you're not relying on as many cards from old sets that are just kind of outdated, then this could be really good. But you'd have to have like a really heavy beast deck. I think like if there was like another Haunted Creeper type thing, I would not be unhappy playing this. It seems fine.
What do you think for the most part? Do you think you get better value or worse value generally from the random drop here?
Well, I always get worse, but most people.
Of course you do. Savjz.
When I first saw the card, I actually thought it's like amazing, and I got really scared. And now I've been so happy that it's not getting played in competitive, because I think this is a very good example of a card that's not healthy for competitive play at all.
Yeah.
I was so worried that so many games would just get decided by what gets rolled out of it. If you get a King Cross, or if you get a the Hungry Crab, the difference is so huge. So it has been a little bit like underwhelming the times where I've seen it. And Hunter doesn't like conditional cards. They want to curve out nicely. They want to go face. This card makes it a bit clunky. You have to add maybe some extra beast. You have to play Web Spinner, which you might otherwise not want to play. So you need to add kind of like bad cards to potentially like suboptimal cards to make it work. So I think there's enough. I'm happy to say that I think there's enough drawbacks from the condition of having beast that this is not a good card. But I wouldn't be too surprised if it's actually like a little bit of a sleeper, and once there's enough beasts, there's enough good beasts that you can, like sticky beasts, if more of those get introduced, that it would be a really, really good card.
Noxious?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the drawback point is really good. I mean, when I saw the card, I was really afraid of what it could do. And, like, obviously it's got that whole variance effect to it that I don't like it for competitive play. Like, I was casting a tournament where I think Oskaka lost 2 matches or 2 games to his opponent because, one time it was a King Crush, the other time it was, like, High Main or something. Anyway, like, back-to-back, just completely crazy outcomes. And you're like, yeah, okay, that was fun to watch, but from a competitive standpoint, I was really worried that this would make it into the core hunter list, and then eventually when you run the stats on it, like your average is basically like a worse Silverhand Knight. Like sure you're getting a beast, but there's a prerequisite to get like a Silverhand Knight, and I'm not gonna pay 5 mana for a 4/4 and a 2/2, so I'm not gonna pay 5 mana for a 3/3 and like a 3/4 on average from Ram Wrangler. I just hope that there is no point where, you know, like in the old days, people start running Snapjaw to enable Houndmaster and Midrange Hunter. I hope we never get that 4-drop beast that is good enough to just enable the Ram Wrangler.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I don't want to see ever. Because as much as I want it, like because it's fun, I also just despise that kind of crazy swing.
Yeah, like a sticky 4-mana beast, if that was to ever to happen, like a playable sticky, playable hard to remove 4-mana beast, I think the Rambler might become a staple.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen one day. You know there's gonna be a 4-mana beast.
Yeah, man.
You're coming up. I mean, they've been focusing so hard on 4 mana. I feel like in all the other classes that it should be on its way. I think.
Piloted kangaroo.
Oh man.
Piloted kangaroo.
Always drops a what comes out of it, like the Savjz combat.
Joey.
Joey.
The little kangaroo out of the pouch.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Sure. That sounds cool.
Nothing like the acid maul you get. I mean, you guys are talking about the good outcomes. So how about when the hunter actually gets an acid maul and it clears this entire board? That's definitely crazy situations. All right, so I think that's going to be it. So this card obviously is more gimmicky, and hopefully not golden in the future, as the Noxious put it. Why don't we go into deck talk here? And we've got 3 decks here, a couple from Hearthstone, and then Reynad actually has a deck to discuss. We'll talk about a couple from Hearthstone first. First one being Aggro Druid. These are all decks that, or at least the Hearthstone ones, are ones that people have gotten into at least top 50 Legend with. So figured it'd be worth taking a look at. This is more the kind of aggro token variety that I think people have at least talked about, or maybe even tried on in the past, but we've never talked about it on this show. So I figured let's just talk about some of the details here. Savjz, what do you think of this deck?
Wow, I mean, I can't believe it works. I haven't seen a lot of people have success with Aggro Druid.
Yeah.
It's a lot of questionable cards, namely the Dark Whispers.
Mm-hmm.
It looks quite interesting. I haven't tried anything quite like this. Double Nourish.
Double Nourish is
Yeah.
pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I have really a hard time evaluating this. Seems like it might be a little bit clunky. You gotta curve out nicely with it. But if you get this kind of applies to every deck, I guess. If you curve out nicely, then you're gonna do well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the deck list is cool, but I don't think it actually works.
Noxious?
So I'm a little surprised by the deck list, and at first I was gonna say, I'm surprised he didn't just go for the the typical aggro. Not that it's very typical, but typical aggro druid with Druid of the Panther, and people putting in Mark of the Wild and really curving low. Instead, what he did is he's got like 1,000 options. Like he's got the Dark Whispers, which it looks ridiculous, but Power of the Wild gives it a little bit more versatility. Juggler works with Living Roots. It's got that. There's multiple plays you can make with the cards you have with this deck, and that's kind of what I like about it. Echoing Ooze looks ridiculous, but then there's Power of the Wild, there's Knife Juggler, there's Savage Roar, Defend of Argus, and then there's Valid Teacher with the usual Innervate, Power of the Wild. Mm-hmm. I feel like the fact that it's running a lot of unorthodox stuff as a top end is, when you put that aside, it always has a play, and it's always a little out, like you have to search for it. I don't think they come in necessarily as obvious ones. And I like that. I'll have to try that one out.
Yeah, it seems more of a flooding druid actually than the
kind of
druid. Yeah. Right. Ray, what do you think?
It seems like a good deck aside from the Whispers, Nourish, and Ixia part, but those might work really well. They do interesting things. I would have to play with it to really know. My first inclination would be to play something like Ancient Allure, over Nourish, and replace Dark Whispers with some other stuff too, maybe Azure Drake, I don't know. But it's definitely not a bad looking deck. It's tough to evaluate. It's one of those things you have to play with. It's cool though. I think the other Aggro Druid deck is really good, really strong.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw Reckful playing it on stream, I think, and he
Mhm.
was like rank 5 on the first day or something, just spamming it. And I was watching his games, and he's just like winning turn 5 every game. Just thinking
Exactly.
about it, and I was like, this seems really hard to interact with for most decks, like the way it curves out. So I showed up to like esports arena where they had that tournament,
Yeah.
and I asked Hyped, I was like, hey, do you have the deck list for that aggro druid everyone's playing? And he's like, what aggro druid? And because I saw Reckful playing mirrors. Apparently, it was from some website or something. I don't know.
He played
But yeah,
what?
eventually it showed up on
Mirrors?
Reddit like a week later, and
Yeah.
now everyone's playing it. But deck seems good.
Yeah, it's good. It's refreshing to see aggro druid actually. Like I'm so tired of seeing the same druid over and over again.
Like, it might be better. That's what's scary. Like, it might
Yeah.
actually be better than normal druid.
Well, there was a time when aggro druid was, at least played more right than mid-range druid, at least for a short period in the meta game. I don't even like a year or two, a year and a half ago or something. So
Yeah,
all right.
I think it was back when they were trying to refine mid-range. Like people had their
Mhm.
own spin on it, which was more tilted.
Yeah, it was like people were starting to get used to the combo being like incredibly powerful all the time, even in mid-range druid. All right, so let's see. We got a priest deck here too. Sounds boring because it's dragon, but there's a couple inner fires and divine spirits added to this, and I've actually played against this like several times on the ladder, and it's always surprised me because I never expect the ending to be what it is. What do you guys think of this type of variant on Dragon Priest? Noxious? It's right up your alley, man.
It's kind of funny because I was playing Crusher Priest. I don't know if any of you have actually played the deck, but it was like before TGT. It was like Stormwind Knights, and you'd run like one Stormwind Knight, one Gnome Rig, and infantry with a typical Priest deck that aims to cycle, and is basically a combo deck that aims to just take you by surprise and finish you off. This is taking everything that's good about Priest right now, which is Dragon, basically, and they're going and adding that extra bit of combo when you're looking at cards like Deathlord and Dragonican Sorcerer, Twilight Guardian, all having a lot more health and attack. I think it's actually really fitting. I'm not sure about two of each other. I'm not sure if that's necessary because it might be super clunky sometimes. But I like the idea of putting at least one single copy in.
Ray?
I was playing a lot of Innerfire Priest before TGT, and I kind of like the deck a lot. I tried some really low curve lists with nothing more than 4 mana and some other stuff. But yeah, I mean, dragons are good. The Innerfire package is better than people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
So I could definitely see this working. The one thing about Innerfire is a lot of times you want to like use the combo on Deathlord to like hit them really low. But then, they deal with your big guy, obviously, and then you don't have the burst damage to finish. So it's tough that this deck doesn't have burst. Like, it's going to be hard to find a good time to Innerfire. You kind of have to only do it once they're already at like 16 or lower. And then if that's the case, you probably already won the game because it meant you had to have board control. And if you have board control with Priest, you've already won. So I guess like what I'm saying is without burst, it's hard for the Innerfire to be as good as you think it is. Because making a 16/16 is surprisingly irrelevant a lot of the time when the rest of your deck can't deal damage.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe incorporating Confuse instead of Inner Fire,
Right.
just so you can have multiple minions, right? Swap might be
You're all
a
about
little
that
bit.
confuse.
Yeah, hell yeah, man.
I
Confuse,
actually
baby.
like that a lot. It makes sense. Like Confuse seems to me like you could literally sub out Divine Spirits and like Inner Fire for Confuse, and you might be able to have like a pseudo Bloodlust. But
Yeah, definitely something like that. I think the Valen Chosen is actually really nice in this too, because you can fight some mid-range decks a little bit, even just throwing a Valen Chosen on a Deathlord, right, and not focusing completely on the combo. Kind of cool. Savjz, what do you think?
I was playing this yesterday, actually.
Oh yeah,
I-
cool.
Yeah, and a little bit today as well. I heard that this was like a rank 1 legend list from Chinese server.
Yeah.
And I gotta be honest, I didn't have any success with it. It seemed very clunky, and closing out games seemed very difficult. I was falling behind a lot on the early game, and even when I was ahead, it was still sometimes like really hard to close out games. It seemed really clunky. I feel like I was doing something wrong, but the Inner Fire and Divine Spirits, they were not really like pulling it through. Against something like Secret's Paladin, for example, like, it was impossible to ever like fully clear the board even with the light bomb. So it didn't work out. I don't know. It was like I was surprised how it looked so cool, but it actually seemed really bad when I was playing it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those decks that it probably takes a lot of games to figure out exactly
Yeah.
how to play every single matchup. But regardless, definitely fun. You guys should try it out. Like the viewers are checking it out. I've played maybe 1 or 2 games with it, and it was kind of cool. All right, next up we've got a deck from Reynad here. I need to add it real quick because he just gave it to me. I'm excited. I don't even know what it is, so this should be.
It's got 2 cards that
Should
I
be
love
fine.
that I
Okay,
haven't
let's see.
seen
Let's see
remotely
this.
enough people play, so I'm pretty happy.
Arcane Blast and what?
Yeah, it's Arcane Blast and
This
just
beautiful
Arcane
golden
Blast.
deck. Oh yes, the
2 copies of
Maligans. All right, here we go. So Ray, why don't you take us through this?
Yeah, I mean, I needed a ladder. Oh, wrong one. That's
Wait, is that the one?
Noxious's. It's way more interesting than mine.
Oh, actually, than me.
Oh,
Actually,
no,
we
no.
can talk about Noxious too in a second.
Yeah, afterwards.
Well, actually, when I have it up, Noxious, why don't you talk about this one?
Oh sure. It's not refined. It's actually like a very rough draft of something I'm trying out. Like obviously I don't play at high levels. Like I don't really aim too much to climb the ladder. So it's mostly for fun. The idea was just getting a Malygos deck with Aviana and a Faceless, like the typical combo. But it's kind of in a normal Druid shell. I'm just trying to figure out how to make the deck draw, and until I figure that out, I don't know if it'll really work out. Like it's obviously trying to get Malygos plus Aviana plus Faceless on the board for Moonfire, but you can just win normally like a Druid would, except you don't get to cheat with combo. So it ends up being like a grinding war until you get the stabilized late game. So I don't know. It's a work in progress. I just feel like finding Azure Drakes or a Nourish maybe would make sense.
Yeah, Nourishes would be good. You have a lot of
Yeah.
9-drops.
All right, here we go. So Rain has a mage here. You can take a look at. Okay, so tempo mage, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I started climbing. I decided to play Hearthstone for a day for some reason, like a few days ago.
For some reason.
It's probably
Wow.
like October 3rd or something, and then so it was like really early in the season, and I was ranked 16, and I decided I'll try Tempo Mage. So I put like mirror images in and the normal stuff, and I eventually started tuning it more and more because it kept winning, and eventually made a bunch of changes. Put in Rag Boom. They weren't there originally. It was more of an aggro list. Added I had 2 Arcane Blast, 2 Mirror Image, and 2 Arcane Missile, Blast, and Mirror Image. So I had all the 1-mana spells. And then I realized Mirror Image is really bad against things that aren't Warrior. So at the end of the day, it looks like a Tempo Mage deck, which isn't super exciting to a lot of people. But the cool thing about this deck is it's actually really well refined for the current metagame. So this is like a deck I would 100% recommend for ladder. And Mulligan's, while it's really efficient, I think it's within 1 card of perfect. That 1 duplicate was a 2nd Arcane Intellect for the longest time, but I made it duplicate because it's a similar effect when you play it from hand, but it's you don't get those games where you don't get value off a Scientist anymore. So it's just a really refined deck. The interesting thing to me about it was like how good Arcane Blast was compared to Mirror Image. It's hard for a 1-mana spell to have a high impact, but because this deck plays so much removal with 2 Blast, 2 Missile, 2 Flame Cannon, 2 Frostbolt, 2 Fireball, Flame Waker, a lot of times instead of you're not like you don't lose the game when you don't have early game board control, unlike most decks. Like most decks, if you lose the early game board, it snowballs out of control and you're dead. Whereas with this deck, a lot of times you'll just have a hand that's like full of spells, and you can it's really easy to find a turn where you go like Flame Waker, Coin Spell, and all of a sudden you're ahead on board. And if you ever get ahead, you stay ahead because you have all this removal. So it just felt really refined to me. It's a really clean, good deck, safe across all matchups. There's no matchup where you're like dead going into it. So I really like it for that reason. I think it's kind of the perfect ladder deck. It's proactive. It's fast. It's good when you're like it can win when you're behind, and yeah, it's just a good deck.
Yeah, sounds good. Savjz, what do you think?
I think that's like Reynad said. I think for ladder that's like pretty good. It looks really fast with those mirror entities, for example. It's and also apprentices too. There's a lot of those tempo plays. Probably fairly consistent. I mean, obviously, secret sometimes you draw into your hand. You don't want to draw those into your hand. Yeah, I mean, I'm still a little bit on the edge about the Arcane Blast. Like Reynad said,
Gets you
not-
Nox.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
I have to, I have a really difficult time believing that those Arcane Blasts actually work when you only have the Azure Drakes for spell power. It might be good, I'm not saying it's not good, but I have to see it with my own eyes too. Well, okay, Flamewaker synergy is also there, but still, like, I don't know, like, can you
Where's
afford
Gazlo?
those? Like, you might throw those too early, or you might make your curve bad, because it's 2 Arcane Blasts, 2 missiles. That's like, and even 2 Flame Cannons, there's so many spells, and I think that with a deck like this, it's really important to, like, curve out nicely, and if there's no targets for those spells, it might hurt the curving ability.
Yeah, you don't keep the removal in the matchups where it's not going to have targets. So like once you figure out mulligans, it pretty rarely happens. But that's the thing I liked about it is you can have a hand of all spells. You don't have to curve, and it's still good. Because at some point they're going to play stuff, and then you play a dude, you kill their thing, and you flip it. There's very few decks that have comeback mechanisms. But yeah, Blast almost never deals 4 damage. It's always 2, and I still play it. Like Holy Smite that can't go face is still good enough when your deck plays Mana Worm, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Flamewaker. It's just so good to just like Sorcerer's Apprentice, Arcane Blast, your Knife Juggler, or just mostly the Flamewaker thing. Something like Mirror Image, it doesn't control the board, whereas Flamewaker Coin Blast will kill pretty much anything they could have in the first 3 turns.
Okay, fair enough.
So we're talking. Well, go ahead, Savjz.
Can definitely imagine that this is one of those decks that when the new season starts, if you want to climb the ladder fast, I'm sure that this works well.
So you don't competitive wise, you don't think it's
no,
it's
I don't see it in competitive, but for like fast climbing on the ladder, I think it's fine. But for competitive, I have my doubts. Like Mirror Entity in competitive play is always a bit weird.
Yeah, it's very different. For competitive play, the deck is like fine, but it's hard to justify playing it over Druid or Handlock or Challenger Paladin or Patron. There's just too many degenerate things you can be doing instead.
We definitely have seen. I think we might have seen more Mage in actually the America BlizzCon tournament than the other 2 regions. Because I kind of vaguely remember seeing like a surprising amount of Mage compared to the big 3, like you mentioned. But yeah, definitely a strong deck right now. Noxious, what do you think of this deck?
I just like the fact that it's like substituting some of the early game for Arcane Blast, because that's pretty much the card that has been sleeping, I find, a lot in TGT. It's a card that looks like it should be working in some mage deck, but if you try to build a control mage, you usually don't get to win the way you want. Whereas if you just sprinkle in Arcane Blast and a tempo, it makes a little bit more sense there. But I'm just curious, why? Like I get Rag is pretty impactful, but have you tried Antonidas and Ronin in those spots, or do they just not fit at all?
I tried Ronin. He was worse than War Golem as expected.
Yeah, of course.
Garbage every game. And then Antonidas is not in the deck because it's not like the idea behind a tempo deck is you dump your hand early for board control.
Yeah.
By turn 7, you should there's 0 chance that you have something like Arcane Blast or Missiles in hand. You would play them before then. So
sure.
The expensive cards in the deck, when you're playing them, they're usually the last card in your hand. So something like Rag is probably the best card in the deck, consistently overperforming. I would play like 3 of them in this if I could. And Boom is solid, not as good as Rag in this deck. Because they can win the game on their own when you play them with an empty hand. But if you play Antonidas with an empty hand, it just doesn't do anything. So Antonidas, if I played Antonidas, I would have to have Clockwork Gnome.
You have to go mech, basically, yeah. At least a little bit mechish. You'd have to put some spare parts.
Just the spare parts, yeah. So Clockwork Gnome instead of Blast, and then Yeti instead of Shredder. And then at that point, you probably want Emperor Thorson as well, because then you can do the whole spare part Emperor Antonidas thing. But yeah, that's not I don't think the deck would be that much worse if it did that. It's just another way to go.
I think Ronin is absolutely garbage. I've tried.
I've tried it many times too.
I've tried it so many times, and always the same thing. I'm like, I wish I had a Rag instead. Rag is so much faster. Then I tried playing both, and okay, turn 8, I have Rag and Ronin. Let me think. Okay, Rag, and then you're like, why do I have a Ronin in my deck?
Yeah.
So you can BGH and get Arcane Missiles right away.
Right.
The only time Ronin was good for me, I was playing Control Warrior, and the other guy played Ronin, and I top decked Faceless, copied it, and then BGH'd it, and then he was sad.
Oh no, that's really nasty. Yeah. Poor card. It's 8 drops need to do something right now, otherwise if it had Battlecry put 3 Arcane Missiles in your hand, I'm like, that's broken, but because it's a death rattle, you almost
I don't know if
I
it'd
mean,
be broken. It'd be good.
really with Archmage
Yeah.
as a follow up, I don't know, man. Like, you guaranteed to get one drops. I'd play it. Give it a shot at least.
All right. Okay, that's gonna be it. I think that's all that we have for decks. We're gonna move on to some Q&A, and for those of you that have posted questions here, I'm gonna go ahead and put the link here again. We're gonna be reading them out and hopefully answering them. Thanks for all of you that have submitted them so far, and if you guys want to submit them like last minute here, I'll definitely refresh the page and try to check out what else is going on. But first thing, I think Colompere Matterhorn asks, how about adding neutral spells to Hearthstone? Which is, I think, been something that a lot of people have suggested in the past. Noxious, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think they'd have to be in the form of consumables, like potions or, some kind of consumable items that you take, just lore-wise. Otherwise, making spells would be a little weird, since most classes tend to have their own lore. But I don't know, it opens this I don't want to say can of worms, really. It's just that there are neutral cards that might as well be class cards right now, like Molten Giant. Well, yes and no with Echo Mage, but there's a lot of times in Hearthstone where some neutral cards might as well have been class cards, like Injured Blade Master, and I feel like neutral spells will fall in the same exact category. I don't know about neutral spells as much as I'd like maybe multi-class spells, because I could see some classes using the same tools, but not necessarily have them be available for a warrior, let's say, right? Like a mana potion, as ridiculous as it sounds, for a warrior, I'm not too sure that would be fitting, but maybe you give it to the caster classes. I don't know, I like the idea, at least.
Okay. What about you guys? Any comments on that question?
Yeah, I think that it's really dangerous, and if there could be neutral spells, but they have to be bad, basically, because some classes get better benefit out of them than others do, and I think that in most cases it would usually be the same classes getting the better use out of the neutral spells, like Rogue with preparations, for example. That's like the first thing in my mind, like, what if there's a neutral spell? Okay, well, Rogue has a prep, so if it's good, then it might be too good for Rogue. And neutral spells on those classes that can't benefit that much out of them would be like as if it wasn't even neutral in the first place. So I think that it's like, okay, the potion thing that Noxious mentioned is kind of interesting, and I think it could be maybe done like some kind of heal thing, not for too much, but yeah, they would definitely have to be weak. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea.
I think that neutral spells already exist. There's a lot of them. Big Game Hunter, Anti-Keelbot.
Yeah.
But there's a big reason. Like when people think about Hearthstone, they're like, "Oh, here's this thing they could do. Why haven't they done this?" And the Hearthstone development team is like very good at what they do. They're smart people. Like there are reasons they didn't incorporate neutral spells, and part of it is like what Savjz said, where they have to be so bad that they're just kind of uninteresting, and it might as well be a minion. Kind of like a 4-mana. For there to be a neutral card draw card, it would have to cost 4 mana. So it would be like Strictly Worse Arcane Intellect. That's not an exciting card. 4 mana draw 2. That's like the power level that all these cards would have to be at. So first of all, they're just not as interesting as minions. Second of all, this I think is the big reason is that Hearthstone team is kind of like, they always struggle with class identity. They want every class to feel like it has its own identity, and the biggest way they do that is with spells. So it's already gotten to the point where like every class just has like different good cards, but there's not much identity to each class. There's multiple classes that are weapon based. There's multiple classes that have buffs. There's multiple classes that heal very well. It is too much overlap right now. When I'm playing like Paladin or when I'm playing Warrior, it doesn't feel like I'm playing. It just needs to feel more warrior-y. And if every class had access to like a neutral armor thing, then there's more crossover between classes and what they can do. So, but also the balance thing, that's a very big part of it too. Imagine Hunter's Mark in any other class. It's disgusting.
Patron.
Oh my god.
Yeah, patron. Imagine it in Mage, 2 mana assassinate, or Druid, or Rogue.
Right.
Or it's just any class would be sick. So.
All right, leads to I think that's a pretty good segue into this next question from Abonet Asmari, who asks, in your opinion, why is Blizzard Hearthstone team so slow to address or even to do anything at all about all the things people have been asking for? Are the people asking for things that are asking for things are a minority, and that is why? Okay, so I guess are the people that are, I guess, complaining a minority, and that's the reason that they're not addressing it. Who wants to take this one?
I'll take it.
Yeah, you kind of
If that's
addressed
okay,
it
unless
anyways.
you guys wanted to say something.
No, go ahead. I'll
Yeah.
pick it up after.
I think okay, it's a really complicated question to answer actually. First of all, there's just a priority list of stuff that has to happen. There's deadlines that have to be met for expansions coming out. There's a lot of work that goes into that, finding voice actors, artwork, all that. Second of all, most of the time people complain about stuff. It's something that the Blizzard team already thought of and didn't change for very good reasons. This whole anti-patron circle jerk on Reddit, for example, any one of the 1,500 kids upvoting this post complaining about the deck, I would challenge any of them to beat me if they're playing patron and I'm playing like basic cards. I think they would lose most of the time. The deck is like very high skill cap. People just kind of echo chamber about problems. Even things like deck slots, if they add it, it's going to be done as part of a bigger plan in a big way, and a lot of times there's engineering reasons that they can't do it, like maybe it's just not programmed in the game. I don't know. There's just so many reasons. They know what they're doing though. Like it's one of the best companies at making games for a reason.
Wow, this is like a non-salt answer from Ray. This is awesome. Any of you two? Any comments on this?
Well,
I kind of forgot. Go ahead. Sorry, I just was gonna say I forgot the original question. So.
Okay, I just wanted to like kind of echo that most of the things that get discussed on Reddit, whatever you see there, like some of the issues potentially with the game, like the Blizzard team has already thought about it. There's much more that has to be considered than what somebody like might at first think when you post that thing on Reddit. Like when you post that you lost 2 patrons in 1 turn and it feels bad, man. It's not that simple. That's like the main thing, I guess. And yeah, there's more to most of the problems than what people think, and Blizzard employees, they really watch carefully all the feedback. Every single patron thread that gets posted, they read that stuff.
You guys have to remember too, guys, they don't want to make a change and then have to revert the change. That's like by far the worst thing you could do as a developer. So yeah, they're very cautious about changes. Noxious, you're gonna say something?
I don't know. I'm thinking about the whole ordeal because I feel like some of the problems that we pinpoint, as a community or the people bring up, a lot of the time they're tied into bigger problems, or you could fix the problem by addressing something else entirely. So there's 10,000 ways to tackle a problem, and the devs know that. Like you don't just change a number on a card to necessarily change it. You could change the way. You could change the ladder system, and I'm sure a lot of people would stop complaining about all the stuff they complain about. So that's one other thing. You have Tavern Brawl was an attempt for them to kind of try to get people to enjoy the game more casually and incentivize them to, like, the people who want to have fun. They don't have any more reason to complain about being beat down by meta decks. Yet when we look at Tavern Brawl, that's not how we see it. We see it as an extra mode that they put in, but really it's addressing a problem that people brought up. So when people bring up, say, Patreon as an example, I feel like a lot of it has to do with the viewer experience we have, and we're really majority on Twitch. We're like a very small segment of the population plays on it and watches it. So when we complain about Patreon, we're basically just talking to one another. And Blizzard knows that internally. Even Reels, I know, mentioned that Patreon was potentially a problem deck when he was streaming after the release of the card. So I don't know. I just feel like it's harder when you're a dev to make the right call when it comes to changing something.
Yeah, I think generally they're taking the approach, and I think Ben mentioned this on his last appearance, is that they want the players, or they want to see if the players can figure out, right, use the ingenuity to correct meta, which is definitely the right approach. I mean, you don't want to assume that the game's like completely just figure it out all the time and then just making rash decisions like that. So that's kind of what they're doing, with Patreon, and definitely mixed feelings. I don't think it's like a majority consensus, like a very, very clear one, even though a lot of people complain, but those are the most vocal people. So we'll see. We'll definitely see.
I want to add one thing to that. Might be like in the future that when there's some things that just like have to get changed. For example, the Undertaker. that 6 months of
Yeah,
Undertaker, it
true.
was too much. So in
Yeah.
some cases, maybe
Yeah,
like if I was to make one request, that when it's like really kind of obvious, maybe that something is like has to, you have to get rid of it. Maybe hopefully it wouldn't be 6 months. It would be a little bit
yeah.
faster. So that might be like so maybe it's a learning process. Like maybe Patreon will get nerfed in 1 month, and we are looking back. Okay, it could have been nerfed a little bit faster. So maybe that's something that will change. That when something is really a huge problem, that the reaction will be faster. Maybe.
Yeah, so one thing I will address, and one issue I do have with Patreon, which I feel like is probably the main reason to change it or to consider changing it, is just the whole notion of it's not fun to play against. And I kind of want to get your opinions on that and what you guys think of it, because in the past there have been decks that usually combo decks, to be honest, that or freezing deck or freeze mage decks that don't have a ton of or people say they don't have a lot of interactivity, therefore it's like it's not fun to play against. And I haven't necessarily thought like that badly about it, because I kind of think it's cool, kind of preparing for anticipation of what's coming and preparing for that. But I think the biggest complaint against Payton is just that it's not fun to play against at all. And I want to see if you guys agree with that sentiment. Ray?
Right. Well.
Oh, is he frozen? I guess he's frozen. All right, one of you guys. Noxious?
I feel like Patreon's actually pretty fun overall. Like, I love the deck. I love watching people play it. The thing is, the only reason, as I said, we kind of complain about it is because there's so much of it. It's not because the deck in and of itself is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a pretty cool deck, high skill demand in tournaments. We just see too much of it because of the format potentially, so that's one of the issues as well. I don't mind the deck. I mean, I feel like I don't complain about Freeze Mage. I used to, back when Blizzard was 5 and Kona Cold was 3 and everything was like
Right.
completely out of whack with your ability to just put something down on the board. That was just impossible. Whereas Patreon, I feel like there is some level of play you can make against it, and even though they are playing solitaire in a way, where they're trying to dig through their deck, you do get to attack them, which is not the case with the old Freeze Mage. And I venture to say that Miracle Rogue could also come back, and it wouldn't even be broken in the way that it might have felt like it was before, just because we have some counterplay in it, like against it now. And I don't know, Patreon to me is fine as far as a deck archetype. Maybe it's a bit over the top, but I wouldn't say that it's like crazily out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Savjz? What do you think about that? Just the sentiment that it's not fun to play.
I'm really
against.
confused something going on here. But okay, I think that it's a really cool deck. It's really high skill cap and all, but just like the fact how it deals the damage from the hand instead of on the board negates so many board control type of strategies that I'm not happy with that. Like there's so many cool things that could be done with Shaman. There's so many cool things that could be done with maybe Priest, like juggling for board control, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just like it's so hard to interact with that. It's a lot of cool strategies that we would see otherwise are now unplayable.
Ray, sentiments on the unfun argument.
I think that, first of all, people will never have fun in a game they're losing, or very rarely will have fun in a game that they lose.
Right.
So I think that, I don't know, the games that you lose to Patreon are a lot more memorable than the games that you beat it. Because the games that you beat it just kind of flounders and armors up, and you play stuff and kill them and pat yourself on the back like, oh, I really outplayed that Patreon player. In reality, like, they misplayed or they drew bad or something. And the games you lose to it are, you are getting wrecked for infinite damage from hand. So it's, you all right, Savjz? What's going on?
I have no idea. I have no.
Right.
We can still see you fine, so it's
Okay,
yeah,
I have like my just like I can't see you guys. I can't see myself. But okay.
It's okay.
So,
We see and hear you.
Yeah.
It's a great program.
oh,
It's
okay.
great.
This feels weird.
Yeah, no, that's my only thing about Patreon. And I think that even if it got nerfed, a lot of the control like deck type of things would always be weak to some combo deck that exists, because there's so many ways to do it. Thanks to Emperor Thorson, I can do like Warlock OTKs from hand. I can do Rogue combos. Like any big Blade Flurry will destroy any like fair slow deck. So I think like those decks will always inherently have weaknesses to combo decks. And I don't think that removing Patreon would all of a sudden make them playable. I think they would just lose to a different combo deck.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible. It might be also an issue that it's Warrior doing the combo because Warrior can heal above 30 and the removal with the weapons is so efficient. So maybe it would be still better if that kind of like strategies were on different classes than Warrior.
Yeah.
Maybe,
I know what you mean.
Things like Sap are good removal, Backstab, Abyss, Flurry. Like it's Rogue has that. If you want healing, you can play Healbot or whatever. I mean, every deck has access to kind of everything, I guess. Because, but yeah, Rogue Warrior is definitely the best at doing it. I agree.
Do you think that there would be like another deck that would surface then, which would be like, okay, everyone is playing. If you're playing combo deck, it would be let's say Mage deck. You would be playing Mage combo deck, or would it maybe be spread out more? That maybe there would be some playing Shaman control and some playing Rogue, or like some Shaman combo, some playing Rogue combo, or is it always gonna drift towards that one being so supreme?
Well, the thing about the combo deck is it really just preys on slow things like Ramp Druid, Control decks, all of that. So if there's two combo decks, one of them is usually better, so they'll have the same matchups that are favorable, but one will usually just be a little bit better. So I think most of the time there'll just be like one combo deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, but can you see yourself running 2 combos in a 3-deck type of format? Probably not, right? Like you probably only carry 1 combo deck for the most part.
Right.
There would have to be a slow control-y deck that's popular, and then I would play like 3 combo decks to try to 3-0 it.
Wow.
But
Okay.
that's really, unless like Dragon Priest becomes dominant in Conquest, which it's not going to happen. The Conquest decks all have very good plans for doing too much damage from hand or
Yep.
Molten, Sun Fury type stuff. So.
All right. So let's see. Next question from Bryn Hall. Question about Hearthstone in Japan here. Love the show. Question to anyone with an opinion about how do you feel about Hearthstone taking off in Japan soon? Are there any players we should look out for if a competitive scene comes out there? Do you think the game will do well since mobile games are huge in Japan now, more so than console, PC gaming combined the last time I checked? Noxious, what do you think? Do you know much about Japan and gaming there?
It's kind of surprising because I don't remember the last time there was a port from a Blizzard game to Japan. Maybe I'm just mistaken historically, but I don't remember that directly. I'm not too sure exactly. I don't know any of the players there. I don't know like any of the card game scenes. I don't know if anybody will even come on Hearthstone as a powerhouse. And even then, we're kind of dissociated in a weird way from the Asian scene by default, and Japan might have its own microcosm of tournaments, and as a result we might never even see them. So as far as the players that we have to look out for, it's a shot in the dark. Like I have no idea, no clue.
Yeah, any of you guys know anything about the Japan scene?
Well, not really like when it comes to Hearthstone, but I do know that the Magic the Gathering is absolutely massive in there. So they do like card games, and I'm actually really surprised that we haven't up to this point we haven't seen multiple players come out of Japan and to just have a good time and do well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean definitely. Oh, go ahead, right?
Yeah, and Magic, some of the players I respected the most were definitely Japanese. Like a lot of them were very good. What's Watanabe was? I mean, I'm pretty sure, Japanese. But Watanabe is I think the best Magic player in the world, really, for a long time. So, they have a really developed scene for Magic. It's weird that we haven't seen them in Hearthstone much.
Yeah, I mean the population in Japan obviously is not even close to China. So purely by numbers, I mean there's probably better chance that a large number of players come from China or good players. But mobile games is enormous in Japan, like a ton of money. I can tell you just from working in the mobile business. So Hearthstone, even just from business standpoint for Blizzard, Japan is a great place for Hearthstone to really explode. It'd be really cool. Yeah, I mean just more regions or more countries to have great players to come from. Okay, let's see. Oscar Vatic, Reynad, will you play the next ATLC, or do you think the lineups will stay the same? It's a huge tournament, and I feel TS would be stronger with you.
I mean, I think the players we had play are very good. The thing is, I'm really busy, and it's a great way to give players on my team exposure. I don't.
He just owns just a bunch of.
The thing about the Tempo Storm brand is I try to have it. For years, I've been doing it since I started. Is I tried to not make it Team Reynad as much as possible. I don't want to do Team Reynad hosting Reynad's tournaments hosted by Reynad on Reynad's channel with Reynad as team captain playing on Team Reynad. That's not like how I want to do a team. I don't think that's sustainable long term. So it's a good way to give our players more exposure, and I'd like to give the players on our team a chance to have more camera time. So I'd rather not take a slot away from that.
All right, fair enough. Zach Cavaretta asks, what do you think of adding Enhanso Mechano into Secret Pally?
I think it's fine if you're playing like a more Summerhand Regen approach, which is mostly like flood the board with a bunch of stuff, double Quartermaster, mid-range type of Secret Pally. It could be kind of fun. I just don't know if it's ever going to be better than the typical variant on it. Because, I mean, you'd have to have a pretty big board, and Paladin gets 1/1s. How good is a 1/1 with Taunt? Probably just as good as a 1/1 without Taunt. And how good is a, you'd have to have a Quartermaster on the board prior to that to make it worth it. And I don't know, a 4-mana investment for that when it's just going to be a 3/2 for 4 most of the time doesn't feel like something I'd be happy to put in. But you can try it out. I mean, if it works out, just make the new meta.
All right, last question from Ruoka, and it's actually addressed to Savjz, but I think I'll just generalize it to all you guys. Do you get recognized a lot in public? Savjz, since it's addressed to you, I'll ask you first.
Actually, like around my hometown, I do. Like when I go to a nightclub or something, it's happened quite a few times.
Oh,
But when I'm abroad, it's not very common. Or when I'm like in other cities, it's happened a few times. But mostly in Finland, it's really rare to get recognized. We did when we were traveling to Irvine like 2 weeks ago. We actually were on the airport. We landed in Chicago, and we had been in the US for 5 minutes, and like on the line, doing the security line. Somebody was like, "Are you Savjz?" So that happened, but in general, it's usually related to the esports events or like a area where I like live around, because people maybe know to like look out for me more.
Yeah. Noxious? Reynad?
Not really. I mean, it happened once at like convenience store. I just moved like 6 months ago, and I went to the convenience store, and some girl behind the counter recognized me. But like, it doesn't happen that often. Probably more in the U.S., I'd imagine, or in EU. But even then, it's like, why would I be there? They wouldn't search for me. So,
Ray?
Back when I was in Minnesota, it wasn't happening, but then I moved to California, and it started. Like the first week I went to the DMV, and somebody recognized me there, and it's happened in like that. I spent a few hours with Kranich actually in an airport, and it happened there. And it comes up once in a while. A lot of times in airports when I'm traveling, and those kinds of places mostly. Always at esports events, but yeah, just in public, it's only happened a few times, surprisingly rarely. We were in Burbank one time, I guess, with Dan, watching like some street performer guy, and some people came up to us and noticed both of us. But it's not that common, maybe like once a month, twice a month.
It's just that question is like more of, I think, generally a barometer of how, I guess how much exposure, right, our community or even just esports to a degree has gotten in the recent times. But that's cool. It's actually great that people recognize you guys around around the world and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Actually, one funny story about that. This was like some months ago. I've been recognized at the airport a few times, or a couple of times. This was this security guard who walked up to me, and he was like, "Hey," and just like pointing at me and stuff. And I'm like, "What?" And then he was like, "Can I take a selfie with you? You're Savjz, right?" I said it in Finnish. I was like, "Okay." We took a selfie and they tweeted it at me. It was pretty funny. It was like a couple of months ago.
Right. Yeah, that is definitely awesome. Imagine if you're like Hollywood celebrity and you have to deal with that like every day. That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah, no,
years,
I'd rather not.
Yeah, in a few years. Yeah, I know. I'm not sure you would want to or not by that time.
Oh, we'll say, Micro Center and Fry's, both times I've gone to like these electronics stores that happen. Like a couple days ago, I got this parts for this PC too. So just the people that are more
any discounts, any perks for them knowing you?
No, not really. Yeah. one guy
I was like, this is useless.
Yeah, I was like,
useless.
oh man.
Yeah. I was ordering computer parts, and this guy was like, "Oh, what are you gonna be doing with it? What do you need?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I need a bunch of programs running. I'm streaming games. Do you know what Twitch is?" He's like, "Yeah, I know what Twitch is." And the guy next to him, he's like, "Oh, it's Reynad," and that's it. And then I paid full price for everything like a pleb.
That's better. That's better than me, because one time I was in the bathroom, going to the bathroom, and the guy's like, we're just staring at the wall, and he's like, "I like your show Unfiltered, man." I'm like,
Holy shit.
what? I'm like, what?
That was awkward.
Yeah, that was creepy, man. But I was like, oh, thanks, man. We're both like staring at the wall like the whole time. That was pretty funny. But all right, guys, I think that's going to be it for the show. It was a great show. Having three of you guys, I thought some good discussions, and really happy about just being able to kind of, again, introduce some more variety to Value Town, and having you guys participate. Well, one thing I did want to, address the viewers is, thanks guys for all the Q&A, but also I wanted to do some more segments on Value Town, and some of the segments I might need a little help from you guys. Wanted to do some things like kind of board analysis, like snapshots of a board, like what's a good play type of thing, kind of going through that. We used to do that actually a while back in Value Town, and I used to like come up with a screenshot. So if you guys have any kind of situation in the games, you don't know how to handle it, be sure to just send those over to me at chris@chanmanv.tv, and we'll try to incorporate it into the show. Also, if you got any decks, I'd like to do a kind of help a deck or pimp your deck type of segment, maybe even play some of the decks, after we've helped improve the decks. Go ahead and send those too, and we'll try to get those on the show. Really appreciate that. But yeah, guys, Noxious, Savjz, Reynad, any shout outs you guys want to do? Start off with you, Noxious.
No, nothing really. Nope.
Nope.
That's it.
Nothing. All right. Savjz.
Yeah, shout out to Doc who just joined our team. It's good to have him on board, and like the Liquid guys. And yeah, the NA regionals this weekend is going to be awesome. So I recommend people to, well, not regionals, the championships. Sorry. So I recommend people to tune in. I'll be the only European there, I guess, but I'll be casting, obviously. Yeah.
Ray.
Yeah. Shout out to the team. Shout out to Dog. It's cool that he joined Liquid. It definitely is a good fit. And then, yeah, shout out to Value Town. First time on Tavern Brawls channel. That's cool. TavernBrawls.com for all your becoming legendary needs. That's it.
No shirt ad.
The usual stuff. I mean, I don't know the energy right now. All the ads are down here in the
logos are down there. And
all right.
yeah, I want to thank you, the three of you guys, obviously, for coming on. Obviously, Tempest Storm for sponsoring the show, and all you guys for watching. The VODs, guys, will be up very, very soon on youtube.com/ChanManV, my channel. And the audios, if you guys haven't noticed, on your iPods or your iPads or your iPhones, it's actually being updated now, so you can actually find Value Town on iTunes, and it's fully up to date. That will obviously be included for this week too, and I'll keep uploading it to SoundCloud too, just for the folks that don't have iTunes. But we're gonna try to do this day. Like, I know one thing about Value Town is we've been kind of jumping all over the place, but we're gonna try our best to do Wednesdays at 1 as consistently as possible. So kind of plan that. Hopefully you can plan that each and every week. There will be some exceptions if we do like arenas, because I do want like guys like Crip and those guys involved with those type of shows, or arena-centric shows, so it may jump around from time to time for those, but for the most part, plan on Wednesdays, guys. But yeah, that's going to be it for Value Town, guys. So for Noxious, Savjz, Reynad, and ChanManV, we'll see you next time. Later.